Welcome back to Review Crew. I'm Gabe.
And I'm Tim. On today's episode, we're going to be reviewing the Book of Boba Fett. Matt and Bina are going to be on the spot reviewing Encanto.
Here's the trailer for the Book of Boba Fett.
I am not a bounty hunter. I've heard otherwise. I know that you sit on the throne of your former employer. Jabba ruled with fear. I intend to rule with respect.
You were all once captains under Jabba the Hutt.
I'm here to make a proposal that's mutually beneficial. Why speak of conflict when cooperation can make us all rich?
What prevents us all from killing you and taking what we want?
If you had spoken such insolence to Jabba, he'd have fed you to his menagerie.
Please, speak freely.
All right, Gabe. So, Book of Boba Fett, probably the big Star Wars TV show for the end of 2021, going into 2022. A lot of hype around it. We're both big Star Wars fans, so I'm just curious to hear what were your general thoughts on the show overall?
General thoughts. Okay, I was very excited for the Book of Boba Fett. I know you and I both were because the premise we were promised was Sopranos in space. And this show left me feeling like the ending of The Sopranos did. Unsatisfied and disappointed. This show did some things to establish a better backstory for one of my favorite Star Wars characters who, you know, in canon, Boba Fett, there's like nothing about him, you know. Dude gets chumped out and dies within like 2 minutes by going into the Sarlacc pit. So it was cool they built the backstory for him, but there are so many better ways it could have been done. But what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, same thing. Going into it, super excited. Boba Fett, honestly, might be my favorite character from the original trilogy, barring like Luke or Vader. Yeah. He's just, I mean, he's got that presence to him, that power, the armor. He's just like a really cool character. So I went in super excited, but I came out of it feeling pretty disappointed. It just kind of, there wasn't a clear direction for Boba, I thought. Like you said, I was excited for kind of crime syndicate thing in space, like very underground, dark, you know, criminal ties, kind of seeing what that underbelly of the criminal world looks like. But we didn't really get that. And you know, the old saying, like, the biggest Star Wars haters are Star Wars fans. I mean, I hate to perpetuate that stereotype, but it's kind of true. Like, I was super excited, but I just was not a fan of the show. I think, yeah, too many, like, just not a clear vision for what the show needed to be, and it wasn't well executed, in my opinion.
I will ask you this. Do you think it's possible that after how good Mandalorian Season 1 and Season 2 are, do you think it's possible that maybe we're just spoiled and like we're asking too much from the Book of Boba Fett?
That is totally fair, because, I mean, that was kind of, The Mandalorian was the first dive into live-action Star Wars TV, and they knocked it out of the park. So, I mean, if you take a step back, there definitely are some great moments in the show, in Book of Boba Fett. I had moments where I was cheering with my friends while we watched it. And I do think, yeah, it's kind of riding that high a little bit, especially Season 2 of The Mandalorian was one of my, like, favorites, like, things of Star Wars. So it is tough, but I think even going into it, like, with no Mandalorian, and just watching those first few episodes, I still kind of would have been like, oh, this isn't what I want. This isn't, and I know, like, you go into it with a vision, and if it's not your vision, then you kind of don't like it, and that's not a fair reason to not like it. But just there wasn't a vision to it for me. It like it wasn't like, oh, this isn't what I expected. It's just like, this isn't what anybody expected. Like there's nothing here. So I think it was kind of like, even going into it without watching Mandalorian, it's kind of like, what is this show, you know?
Yeah, there's a point where I kind of have to disagree with you, because you said there's really no vision for the Book of Boba Fett. And I would like to argue to you that there are too many visions for the Book of Boba Fett. Because one of the things that made The Mandalorian work so well is that Jon Favreau, he was the guiding voice for that show. And everyone knows just how talented this man is. I mean, he made Iron Man, you know, in the MCU, and it was just some of the, like, it built the MCU. And then he took The Mandalorian and he gave us some of the best Star Wars content. But with the Book of Boba Fett, there was, what I believe, somewhere around 5 different people who were producing, directing, and writing episodes. Robert Rodriguez needs to stay away from Star Wars. If he goes near it again, I'm going to have an issue. Kevin Filon, there's just so many different people who were involved in making this show. And I think that's what created this tonal shift that would appear randomly. Because we had aspects of this Boba Fett crime show that was really cool. But then we got an origin story, and then there were some heist moments with the train, and then there were these Power Ranger kids on these speeder bikes, and it became like a children's TV show. And so my issue with it is that there was no consistency in what we wanted. Because if they would have stuck to one thing, there would have been a lot more moments for character development. Because if you ask me, the central issue with this show is the lack of development for its main character, Boba Fett.
Yeah, you know, you're right. I should specify there's no clear unified vision. You're right. There's too many visions. And especially Robert Rodriguez, like, he is a very creative individual. He's got a mind that just works on its own, and it's very colorful and very animated. Like, you look at the Spy Kids and like the Machete films and all those, and he's very animated, but it just doesn't work for this kind of content. Like for Boba Fett, who's supposed to be this underground, like, you know, kind of no nonsense, gets it done kind of guy. And that really comes out in those speeder bikes. I mean, come on, how colorful are those for Tatooine? Like, it's Tatooine, it's a dirt planet. Like, why are they on these multicolored bikes? Anyway, that's a different issue.
No, Robert Rodriguez's style is a definite juxtaposition to Tatooine, and those speeder bikes were just, I tried to ignore them, but it was so hard. And then you go online and you see everyone else making fun of it, and you go, okay, I'm not crazy. At least everyone else is thinking the same thing. But I agree with you that, you know, he is really cool. And speaking of Machete, Danny Trejo for a couple of seconds, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's pretty cool. Like, that was
a big cameo.
That was a nice little cameo. Timothy Olyphant, as we're gonna get into in our second part of this discussion. But, you know, Robert Rodriguez, he's creative, but it didn't work for Star Wars. And I think one of the reasons that we didn't see that character development for Boba Fett is because they spent so much time getting these side characters correct. You know, there's Black Kyrgyzstan, this amazing Wookiee who was a really cool bounty hunter, and Ming-Na Wen was awesome as Fennec Shand. But this is the Book of Boba Fett. It is not the Book of Boba Fett and a bunch of other people that you're gonna love, you know? But yeah, and so we're definitely gonna talk about, you know, how some other characters introduced overshadowed Boba Fett. And we'll get back to that in just a second.
Same address, new website. orangetvnetwork.syr.edu. OTN launched a new website that gives you all the information you need about your student TV station. Information about all of our shows and our programming partners. On the air 24/7, you can watch the OTN live stream on any device. orangetvnetwork.syr.edu. orangetvnetwork.syr.edu. And tune your ears into our podcasts. orangetvnetwork.syr.edu. Check out the daily program schedule by clicking the link under our shows. orangetvnetwork.syr.edu.
Hey everybody, welcome back to our discussion of the Book of Boba Fett. We were just talking about how some of the characters in this show kind of push away Boba Fett. Now, Tim, episode 4, 5, 6, and 7. This is the point in the show where it stops becoming the Book of Boba Fett and it becomes Mandalorian. Mandalorian. Now, I love Mando. Okay, The Mandalorian is one of my favorite television shows, just period, and that's probably because I'm a Star Wars fan. But then Luke Skywalker comes, and they fixed his face, so good for them.
He does look great.
And then
way better.
Grogu comes, and then there's just so many new side characters: Cad Bane, Cobb Vanth. Tell me about, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it was a lot to take in. I mean, I'm all for hey, throwing in a character, like an established character that we know, that's a lot of fun. Then you throw in another one, and another one, and another one, and another one, and it gets to the point where it's like, okay, hold on, this show is focused on Boba Fett, but it's not anymore. It's like Mando 2.5. See, that's pretty much what it is. And I love Mando too. He's a great character. It just the fact that they dedicated pretty much 2 full episodes to Mando alone, taking away from Boba. There are memes all over the place how hey, look, Boba Fett had a cameo in this episode of Mandalorian season 2.5. It's his show, and it's just, these are great moments for Mando and Grogu and all those characters, but I feel like that wasn't necessarily needed. I would have loved a scene with Mando where we kind of reintroduce him and then he's brought into Boba Fett's conflict. But to have 2 full episodes cheapens kind of Boba Fett's story and the show as a whole, and I think that would be better placed in The Mandalorian Season 3, which everyone's excited for.
I definitely agree with you. Now, I will say, the scene where they reintroduce Mando to this show, and he's got the Darksaber and he's just fighting people, that's a cool moment. But it's a moment that overstays its welcome. Then they introduce Cad Bane. Now, if you're a fan of the Clone Wars, we all love Cad Bane. He's an amazing, awesome bounty hunter. And when they introduce him, it's great. You see him walking out of the dust, and he's got the wide brim hat, and he takes on Cobb Vanth. It's cool. But the issue with it is it's way too late. If they would have introduced him in episode 1, give us a reason that him and Boba hate each other, it would have been so much different. But it's not. And so introducing these characters isn't bad, but first you got to know your moment when you're going to do it. And second, they can't overstay their welcome, and they definitely do. In fact, the ending of this show is Mando and Grogu, going off into space. And, that gets me excited for season 3. But Boba Fett should have been the ending of his own show. And
I absolutely agree. It's it's a great moment for them, but I mean, come on, Boba's the focus here. And I think I absolutely, with the Cad Bane thing, I agree too. The Pike Syndicate is kind of hinted at as the big villain in those first couple episodes, and that's cool. What you could do is use Cad Bane kind of as that connection between them. Oh, Cad Bane's on the prowl in Tatooine. Who's he working for? What's the deal?
Use him as an enforcer.
Absolutely, an enforcer. And then it's kind of oh, he's working for the Pike Syndicate, and now this is becoming a big problem. And then that's where you get some of that more kind of criminal underground warfare between Boba and the Pike Syndicate and Cad Bane. So I agree. Yeah, you gotta introduce these characters sooner, which they're great characters. I loved Cad Bane's scenes. If he was more invested in the story or at an earlier point, it would have made his final fate in the last episode that much more enjoyable when that final duel between the two, and kind of his whole storyline with Boba would have been kind of almost a focal point of the story, even within the whole gang warfare major plot.
Yeah, and there's an issue in the fact that we feel like Boba Fett isn't developed, because for 4 episodes of this show, we're getting flashbacks about Boba's time. We see him escaping the Sarlacc pit, and he joins up with the Tusken Raiders. We have this, we previously mentioned it, but there's a heist on a train, and everything kind of goes wrong, and Boba's to blame for it. And we see him, train with these weapons. And they spend so much time with it, but it's not effective development, because it's not answering the questions we all want answered. We want to know, Boba Fett is the most ruthless bounty hunter in the galaxy. That's where he is in episode 4 or 5. What happened to make him this guy who's now okay with, he's being merciful to the people of Tatooine? That's a big change. And I'm not opposed to such a change, but you have to give me a catalyst for that to happen. And I honestly feel like they didn't do that. But despite all those things, I do think there were a few really good moments of this show. Personally, Boba Fett riding the Rancor, I saw that and I said, I'm going to need a Funko Pop of that right away. That was an awesome moment. And like I said, Ming-Na Wen, she did an amazing performance as Fennec Shand. What were some of your favorite parts of this show?
Yeah, absolutely. The Rancor scene was great. Mando's introduction scene with the Darksaber was great. You get a little sense of oh yeah, it's not just that easy to wield a lightsaber. Boba Fett, he had that moment where he kind of was back in the Slave One, and he revisited the Sarlacc pit, and then he gunned down all of the Nikto bikers. And it was kind of a moment of like, oh, okay, yeah, he's still got that sense of, oh, I'm a ruthless bounty hunter, and I will, if you cross me, you're done. So there were definitely like seeds planted for great moments for Boba, and I enjoyed those a lot. I just felt that, yeah, like they could have, like with the Rancor scene, they could have capitalized on that. Have a few scenes of Boba like trying to ride the Rancor, and it doesn't work out. And then in the finale, he rides it and kicks butt. With the Nikto bikers, you know, have a few scenes of him trying to hunt them down first, and then he, like, you know, shoots them in the Slave One, and then that makes it that much more enjoyable. So definitely a lot of great moments for this show. I just felt that they could have been developed and introduced in a more fluid manner.
I would agree with you. So we've heard what you didn't like. We heard what you did like. Tim, what is your rating for the Book of Boba Fett?
Overall rating, it's going to be lower. It's a 4 out of 10 for me, just because I do have some moments that are enjoyable, and Boba Fett's still my favorite character, so a little bit of bias there. But overall, just a lack of a clear vision and some, you know, subpar storytelling elements just made it not a super enjoyable watch for me. What about you?
I would agree with you. I'm an egregiously high rater, but even I have to give this a 5 because this is a half of a television show. You know, maybe they can do better with season 2. I'm still going to watch it, but this, as one season of a show, it was just unsatisfying. But yeah, that was our review of Book of Boba Fett. We'll be right back after this. That's all for this week. If you want to follow more Review Crew content, go to the Review Crew Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, as well as Orange TV Network on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, and YouTube.
Find the Review Q's podcast on Spotify or on our website at orangetvnetwork.syr.edu, where you can also find our blog and more OTN information.
Check out this week's screening hosted by University Union, House of Gucci. Also, be sure to check out Friday Night Movie Night on OTN. This week's movies are Steamboat Bill Jr. and Charade.
See you next week.